Are back with another great episode of Liam Picks Fights. Today, we will be breaking down UFC Vegas 37. It's going to be Anthony Smith and Ryan Spann in the light heavyweight division in the main event. And I'm bringing along the troops with me. I got my man, JShiffyDFS. That's where you can find him on Twitter. Jonah, how you doing tonight, brother? Welcome aboard.
I'm good, Liam. Thank you for having me. My first time on the show. I've watched the show before. I don't quite have the same, nice background you had last weekend breaking down the Contender Series fights, but yeah, I'm happy to be here. We had a week off last week, so back this week. 15 fight card. Not a ton of spots I'm betting. I'll just get that out of the way early, but I think there's some interesting spots to talk through on this card for sure.
Absolutely. And, even if they stack up one of their, least competitive UFC offerings of the year, they still sprinkle in some good fights, some interesting fights, some things that keep, the diehard fight fans like you and me engaged and, willing to play along, find a couple spots. And, I got in on a lot of spots early here. And I was expecting a little more line movement than we've seen on some of these plays. So I don't know if I'm crazy. Some of them have gone against me as well. But we're going to have to see how it plays out, man. I have, a decent number of plays. Some of them are just like small re-ups on lines I had already touched, at a worse price. So we're going to have to see how it plays out. I know that we differ on a couple of spots too. So that's what I'm excited about. We got our man Tim in the chat saying, let's effing go. Appreciate you, Tim. Always supporting. So yeah, man, we got a big fight card ahead of us. So we can kick this off real quick. Before we do that, just want to say to everybody who's watching live, go ahead and like this video, get subscribed to the channel if you're not already. Appreciate big time when you do. And on top of that, guys, just want to remind everyone, this show is brought to you by PrizePicks. I already tweeted out my PrizePicks play that I'm on already, which is highly Alatang to get over 2.5 takedowns. And I forget what the other takedown line was. I'll have to look back at it. But
I think I can help you out on that one. I remember.
Absolutely. What's that?
I think it was like Armand Sarukin and like over 3.5.
Oh, yeah, dude, it was. It's over 3.5. And that's because Armand averages 10 attempts per fight. Yagos, if you look at his UFC career, where he's been exploited, it's by better grapplers. People who have attempted takedowns have gotten them in, big amounts against him. I think it's if you attempted 4 or more takedowns, you've gotten 2 or more takedowns against him in every fight. And Armand is probably, amongst the better grapplers that he's faced. Obviously faced Charles Oliveira, best, submission grappler in UFC history. But I think from a pure wrestling perspective, Armand, if he's attempting 10 takedowns here, is going to get 4 of them. And that's what I'm looking to see. So that's my PrizePicks play. It's a $5 entry, but hoping that I'm going to score on that one. Was able to win a football PrizePicks selection last week. So if you guys decide you want to play along, you want to check out what PrizePicks is offering, simplest daily fantasy sports offering, in my opinion. It's literally just pick 2 to 5 prop totals, over, under. That's it. And you could do across sports. You could do fantasy point projections. You could also do single stats like I did with the takedown. So, man, I'm fired up about this. If you guys play along, promo code Liam, they'll deposit match you 100% up to $100. So thank you very much to my sponsors at PrizePicks. Now, let's get the show rolling, folks. We will start at the bottom of the card where I have spent the least time, effort, and energy because Hannah Goldie's already done me wrong before. We got Hannah Goldie. We got Emily Whitmire. In my opinion, we got not a ton to like on either side, broadly speaking, in terms of their upside in the division. So, Jonah, how do you even handicap something like this, my man?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said it best in terms of like divisional upside over the long term. I don't really see much in terms of Emily Whitmire versus Hannah Goldie. I did spend some time breaking down the fight. I came across eventually with no action on it, but I do think it's kind of an interesting one when you look at the stylistics here because, Hannah Goldie is someone who is basically as ripped as you can possibly be at 115 pounds, right? Like the way she looks is the way she fights, right? Like it's not like she's a super
muscle
striker. Right, exactly. Not a great wrestler, but she goes in there. She's super physical, super strong. And with Emily Whitmire, she's kind of the opposite, where I don't really view her as a super physical fighter. And, I think just kind of wiki capping this one, you might see something like Emily Whitmire has been submitted in all of her UFC losses and really all her losses in her career. But then you look at the girls who are submitting her, like Polyana Viana. I think all of her UFC wins are by submission. Jillian Robertson has some of the most subs in UFC women's history. Amanda Hebos, we know, is an elite level grappler. So it's one of those things where, like, I think that Whitmire probably has the advantage grappling, but is also susceptible to being submitted. We've seen that before. So I think it's a close fight, most likely. It's certainly lined as a close fight now, which I think is pretty accurate. If you want to bet like Hannah Goldie by sub at 20-1, I think you could do worse than that, right? Like Whitmire was submitted from guard last time out. Goldie landed 2 takedowns for last time out. I'm not saying Goldie's going to go in there and even be the better grappler necessarily, but I don't know. I don't have action on the fight, but if you want a piece of 20-1 on a submission for someone who just got submitted from guard, I think you could do worse taking a long shot. So yeah, no action for me. I guess I'll pick Goldie, but it's not a confident lean at all.
I hear you for sure, man. And I really just was disappointed by Hannah Goldie's performance. I was expecting a little bit more improvements, and I'm just not seeing the requisite improvements, man. She throws a lot of kicks, not really active with the hands. And, I'd like to see that optically from my fighter. I want them to be throwing hands. I want them to be throwing a variety of strikes. And, a lot of times those flashy kicks don't end up landing, or if they do, it's like sometimes the most effective moment she has in the fight, but it's also like, they're so few and far between. It's really hard for her to win minutes like you were talking about. And so for me, Hannah Goldie is tough to play for that reason. And, I get it when you're playing a big, plus number on her. I could see it because she's got the hardware. But I also think, man, at evens, which I think is what it's approaching now, I'm going to double check best fight odds for the most up-to-date information on this one. And we've got -120 is the best market price on Emily Whitmire, and +110 is the best market price on Hannah Goldie. So, them's the breaks, guys. I do think that's where the line movement's going to stop. I do think Emily Whitmire is probably going to close as the favorite here, but there's been so much steam on Hannah Goldie. You never know. I think that this line could flip by fight time. It could be a pick'em price, but we've already spent more time talking about it than I've spent looking at it. So we can move right along to the next one. We got Tim says 20-1 on a degenerate prop. That was for me, Jonah. Thank you. Hey, shout out to you, Tim. I like a nice submission prop myself. Was able to cash that Jalton Almeida submission prop in the main event for Dana White's Contender Series last night, +525. So sometimes that prop market, those derivatives can be the easiest ones to pick off and exploit, man. Always got to look for those opportunities. Moving right along, though, I think we both have action on this one. And I also think that we might be aligned here. I did hear my man, I think it was Newsom, breaking down this fight and went the other way. I did hear his argument and think, man, you know what? That was a sound argument. So I'm going to go back and revisit the tape here. I played this line a while back. And I'm going to have some closing line value here. It looks like, I played Hailey Alatang for 1.05 units at -105. So I'm looking to win a unit back here. And, I think Hailey Alatang has put together a decent enough run so far in the UFC. Obviously the Casey Kenny fight was ugly. He gets beat up in that spot, but he also, I thought he showed heart. I thought he showed toughness and determination. I thought a lot of guys would have quit in that spot. The thing that was a little concerning, right, is that if you bet him in that spot, you would have been hoping he's attempting takedowns. And I don't even think he ended up attempting takedowns. Now, granted, Casey Kenny's also kind of a sprawl and brawl guy. It would have been tough to get those takedowns going, and he was kind of stuck out in no man's land and out in range. But I think that in this fight, he's probably going to be able to get his wrestling going a little bit better. Granted, Gustavo Lopez isn't a bum by any means. I actually bet him against Adrian Yanez at the peak of his underdog price, and it didn't look good in retrospect, I'll tell you that. And Adrian Yanez has proven to be the good since. But I do think that, what concerned me there was just a lack of output and activity, a lack of, dogfight in that Adrian Yanez fight. I didn't think that he really tried to fight his way back into it. He was kind of just stuck in the mud in that fight. And, it's happened to him before. It's happened to him in a grappling perspective against Merab. And granted, that's on short notice. So you got to give him, a little bit of, grace for that. But he did get taken down over and over and over repeatedly, like Merab tends to do to people. And I think that Haile Alateng, when he attempts takedowns, he gets them. I think it's on 20 takedown attempts in the UFC through 2 fights. He got 7 takedowns, and then he just didn't attempt any against Casey Kenny. I think if he attempts takedowns here, mixes up the game plan, I do think he's probably got more power in the hands. I think Gustavo's probably got a little bit more variety in his striking tools. But I like Haile Alateng here. And the market has sided with me so far, and I think you're on the same side. Jonah, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I feel similarly. I actually got in at minus 105 to win a unit on this bet on the Alateng side with you. I think this is an interesting matchup because with Gustavo Lopez, we have someone who has only fought 3 times in the UFC, and he went from fighting a super high-level fighter who's about to be minus 200 against a former title contender in Marlon Moraes, that's Merab. And then he goes on to fight Anthony Burkak, who's like not in the UFC anymore, was low level, was kind of, handed a win to some extent. And then he goes all the way back up to fight Adrian Yanez again. And, Yanez isn't necessarily top 5, top 10 right now. I got to be careful with what I say about Adrian Yanez because he retweeted me the other week and did not like some of my opinions about Dana White Contender Series. So I got to be careful, but I think Adrian Yanez is most likely the goods, at least in terms of the striking. And you just kind of mentioned like Gustavo Lopez just seemed kind of stuck in neutral in that fight, right? Like he couldn't really get anything going. I think if you had a bet on him like you did Liam, you were probably hoping that he would like push a pace a little bit more, try to make the fight dirty. He's not going to win a clean.
Maybe try to wrestle, maybe,
exactly.
Push him against the fence. Don't stand there and get jabbed the whole night.
Yeah. Virtually
any of the above would have been just fine for me.
Exactly. Virtually anything besides stare at him while you get, hit in the face over and over again. And that's kind of what happened. And with Haile Alateng, it's interesting because he's also fought a decent, strength of schedule. I know Ryan Benoit's not in the UFC. Yeah, he's not in the UFC anymore. And then Becquerel, like he's a high-level striker. Casey Kenny, obviously, he got beat up in that fight. But what I think it comes down to here is just Alateng is a better wrestler. We know that he has a bit of a wrestling background. I think he's more reliable to shoot takedowns. If there's one thing that's going to make you shoot takedowns, it might not be while you're getting kicked in the body 100 times versus Casey Kenny, but you go back and watch that fight and you think, hey, I was 2-0 in the UFC, and then I didn't shoot any takedowns. I got kicked in the body a lot. Like maybe I'll shoot takedowns my next time out. So I do think that, Alateng has a wrestling upside here. I also think he's just a little bit more reliable to throw volume on the feet, right? Like neither guy's a great striker. In fact, if you look at their striking metrics, it's like super bad on both sides. Neither one of them has really been able to outstrike opponents at distance, but I do like Alateng striking a little more, although it's close, but I do think that his wrestling is enough to make me take the shot at minus 105. At current market, let me see what it's at now. I'm seeing like minus 130s. I see a minus 125 out there.
Minus 118 is best market available on Haile Alateng, and plus 113 is the best comeback on Gustavo Lopez currently available.
I see that.
Fight odds.
My minus 118 of Bet Rivers looking at best fight odds. No, I think that's probably out of a range I would play it at. There might be a small edge there, but at current market, I think the time has kind of passed to some extent to hop on the Haile Alateng side. But I did get in at minus 105, and I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to stick it out, ride the CLV, and hopefully he comes through on Saturday.
I would tend to agree. And, the only thing I'm looking at is this prop on Alateng to win by decision. Best market price is plus 168. So, that's probably not going to be something I end up touching, but that's what I was considering here because I do think that Gustavo Lopez is a tough guy. I think it was a 3rd round finish against Yanez. He went all 3 against Merab. Granted, Merab's not the biggest finisher, but up in that fight and getting controlled. And, he was able to work back to his feet. So I don't think it's going to be an easy fight, but I do think that Haile Alateng, with the power, with the wrestling, can mix it up and probably, steal a decision here. I think 29-28 or 30-27. But that's what I'm feeling like for this fight. And, I think that, like you said, ride the closing line value and, probably just leave it alone at this point. I think if this line continues to move, honestly, I might, take that share back on Gustavo Lopez if he hits that above a plus 125 number. Because I think that that's kind of the hinge point for this fight. I think minus 125 is like, close to accurate. I think Haile Alateng should maybe be minus 140 in this spot. So if we're starting to approach, that number on Gustavo Lopez, I might just hedge my way out a little bit, for safety's sake. But we'll see how it goes, man, as we approach fight time. Like I said, I want to revisit that one from a tape perspective and make sure, the Haile Alatanks wrestling is what I remember it being. Now, moving right along the card, the only other question there was, do you know where he's training? I thought it was Fight Ready, but now I'm looking on Tapology and not seeing. So I don't know exactly where Haile Alatank's training, but if he is training at Fight Ready, then I like it even more.
Yeah, that would be a boost.
Training.
I'll check out his Instagram while we move on to the next fight, and I'll let you know when we get back. Because I actually hadn't heard that he was necessarily in the States for this camp, so I'll take a look at the Instagram when we go over the next fight up here.
All right, awesome. Appreciate that. So then we move right along, man, and this is a fight that seems like the community is pretty split on, but I've seen a lot of love for Carlson Harris as an underdog, man, and I get why, right? Explodes on the scene with that, very nice, slick front headlock Darce finish in his UFC debut. So obviously talented submission grappler, pretty credible resume on the regional scene as well. Put together a decent number of fights. I want to say over 20 fights. So, Carlson Harris comes in with a little bit of experience here, but Impa Kasanganay, extensive amateur background before he turned pro, with some pretty impressive competition in there. Obviously, he had that very public stumble in the UFC that cost me some coin, if I'm honest. And so I think that, I'd be hesitant to play Impa over that minus 200 price against virtually anybody now, just because of some of my durability concerns. I've seen Impa get staggered a little bit. Sometimes I don't like how he reacts to punches and how he watches things hit him. Sometimes, doesn't cover up in time. His reaction speed isn't always what I'd like it to be. But I also think that, he's demonstrating that he improves fight over fight. I think he's a smart guy, pretty well schooled. I think he's an educated fighter. I don't think that he's just out there, winging shots. I do think that he's trying to have a process behind his game. And, I don't think Carlson Harris is just going to easily out wrestle him here. I think Carlson's best path is to find that front headlock situation at some point, whether it's from staggering him or from, taking the back and then creating, a front headlock scramble, forcing him to turtle in some position. I think that that's going to be tough to achieve against somebody like Impa. I think Impa's probably going to be able to wrestle out a lot of those positions. I do think he's a pretty decent grappler in his own right. He got that no hooks, rear naked choke against Sasha Palatnikov, which that hasn't aged that well. Ramiz Brahimaj, I think it was, did the same thing to him. But, I do think that Impa's improving. I think that he has the wrestling to stay upright in this fight for the most part. And, if he's staying upright, I do favor him on the feet. The matchup this kind of reminded me of was Jared Cannonier and Jack Hermanson, because Jack has, very slick submission game. He's got kind of weird, funky, unorthodox striking that can beat people at the lower level. And he can play from on top and land some shots. I do think Carlson Harris can control minutes on top if he's, able to get a flat backed Impa Kasanganay and bottom half guard or something. But I don't think that that's going to happen very often. I do favor Impa, when this fight is standing pretty significantly. I think he's faster and I think he hits harder. There is power on the Carlson Harris side. I will say, a club and sub, like I said, I think is his probably best path to victory. And so I would be interested in looking at what the sub price is on Harris, but I feel like the market is going to be so wise to that, given what we saw in his last outing and, how submission reliant he seemed out there, because he really looked desperate on the feet, in my opinion. And, not to say that that'll be the case in every matchup, but I do think that, that was kind of a tailor-made matchup for Carlson Harris, who's also the much older guy in this spot, which is a concern for me. Impa's a young guy at a good team, making constant improvements, and I think that that's a scary proposition. How do you feel about this one, Jonah?
Yeah, so first thing, speaking of teams, I did take a look at Haile Alatank's Instagram. He was at Fight Ready in late August. He's there as of yesterday, so I think that's a good sign for our bet for sure. Haile Alatank doesn't have many followers on Instagram. I don't know how well known that is. He's got like 95 likes on his posts, but
dude, I was gonna say even on Tapology, there's no Instagram listed. I was like, who is this guy? What happened to him?
Yeah, it took a little Google search while you're starting on this fight, but yeah, so he is there. And speaking of camps, and then in terms of this fight, I actually, I think I'm higher than the market on both guys. I'm not someone who, for people who have followed my work, I'm not super bullish on betting on guys in their UFC debut in general. I'm not necessarily looking to fade them, but oftentimes, I'll sit back, I'll see what they look like at the UFC level. Carlson Harris was an exception to that rule. I know part of it was because he got the Christian Aguilera matchup, but I had a pretty big bet on Harris in his debut, and this guy is pretty lethal. You mentioned the front headlock sequence. Like if he gets you down there, he's putting you through like the absolute ringer of chokes. Like you are in bad shape, and he does a great job at getting that to that position, right? It's not like he randomly falls into it and then he finishes. A guy who has a ton of like anaconda chokes, stuff like that, is Vicente Luque, and sometimes Luque isn't like looking to take. Yeah, Luque isn't necessarily even looking to take you down. Just if you get in a scramble with him, he's snatching your neck, and he's super opportunistic with it. Carlson Harris is more so he's trying to get you in that exact position and shoot the takedowns. Of course, I'm not, comparing him to Vicente Luque. I don't think he's the same level of fighter. I'm just saying in terms of their approach to it, it's kind of different where like Harris kind of needs to get that front headlock position, in my opinion, to win fights at the mid, at the mid level of the UFC, I think. And with Impa Kasanganay, you mentioned he got knocked out by Buckley, who we'll talk about later on this card in public fashion for sure. But this is a guy who, I think that outside of that, his durability is decent. His cardio is pretty good. I thought he might be better suited for 185, where he can kind of weaponize his cardio a little bit more so than 170. But I was talking about this a little bit last week, or I guess it was 2 weeks ago with Marc-Andre Barriault, where, if you have durability and cardio at 170 pounds or higher, you're like a top 20, top 25 guy, pretty much no matter what the rest of your skill set is. And Impa does seem to be improving every time out. So I understand a little bit, the Harris money coming in early. He certainly is lethal from that position. And I think he'll have a couple opportunities to get to the front headlock. But outside of that, Impa, pretty durable guy. Like I don't think Harris is going to hurt him on the feet. I think Impa probably has better cardio, and I think his striking is certainly better at this point in time. I agree with what you said about how he watches himself get punched a little bit. He tries to shoulder roll some like really big shots. Sometimes I'm like, just raise your guard in, but like you don't need to, look all sexy shoulder rolling out of overhand right. You know what I mean? But I do ultimately think that Impa's a more well-rounded fighter. And this is a spot that, like, if Impa gets down to minus 110, minus 115, and we're getting close, I would probably place a wager on him. I just think he's the more well-rounded fighter. Out of two guys that I kind of like over the long term, I think these guys will each win fights, several fights in the UFC.
I could definitely see exactly what you're saying, man. And, I'm looking right now. The best market price is minus 117 on Impa Kasanganay. And, it's really interesting to me because Impa opened up minus 150 and quickly got bet up to minus 175. And he hung out there for a good while before all this late market action has come in on the other side. So I do think, if I'm just trying to read markets there, that would tell me that there was probably some sharp early money that came in on the Impa side. And since then, there's been a lot more public money on Harris because they remember the fun submission. And I do think that Impa, as we get closer to fight time, is definitely going to be the sharp side at this point. And, I don't know that for sure. I have seen sharps go both ways on this fight. People I respect on both sides. So this is a fun one. It's a well-matched fight. I think Jonah's right on the money to say that this is a fight where, both of these guys could have potential wins in the UFC going forward, even at a higher level. What was that, Jonah?
Yeah, can I just add one more thing here? Is something I was thinking of before this is like Impa, you mentioned he got the submission over Palatnikov with no hooks in. I think if he doesn't win by submission there, we get him as a dog in this fight as opposed to, minus 110. Because now people are like, oh, this guy can grapple too. When in reality, like, I don't think Impa is a better grappler. Like Carlson Harris is a good offensive grappler, but I think Impa might be the better wrestler. Like Harris is real only takedowns are like he goes to that body lock and then looks for some sort of trip to get it to the ground. So yeah, I kind of wish that Impa didn't get the sub. Like if he had just finished via TKO on the ground, I think we might get him as a dog here. And now it seems like the market's kind of wise to, all right, this guy can grapple a little bit as well. It's not going to be one-sided action the way Harris's debut was.
Absolutely. Although my only concern with betting Impa is just that, that visual of him sometimes laying in guard and waiting for a chance to get back up. if he gives away minutes laying down in this fight, I will be screaming at my television for sure.
Right.
And that's my only concern. But I do think, I'm expecting that this line's going to end up at pick'em, given all the love I've seen on Harris. And, if I see that -110, bang the hammer. That I'm probably going to start putting some wagers down on Impa Kasanganay. So that's how I'm feeling about it. Want to shout out my man, Uncle Wheezy. Says, what's up, Liam and Jay Shiffy? Let's go. Appreciate you, Uncle Wheezy. Everybody in MMA's favorite uncle. He says, Harris's fights tend to take place in control time positions, whether or not the takedowns are completed. Yeah, man. One of those fighters likes to force it into the clinch, likes to force it against the cage, likes to force his takedown opportunities. But I do think that Impa's a big, strong guy, man. I think he's probably going to be able to reverse some positions, get some of his own control time against the clinch, and possibly, pick him up and slam him himself. Impa's a strong guy. And I really think that he, Jonah pointed it out. There's a difference between grappling and wrestling. He's an excellent grappler, Carlson Harris, but his wrestling seems all right. He hasn't gotten it with impunity on everybody he's fought, and certainly hasn't been able to exploit everybody in the front headlock. So I don't think that he's a lock to get it, even if he gets him down at any point. I don't think he's like a one takedown sub kind of guy. I do think it's one time in the wrong position and you could get subbed. So if you do play Impa and you want a little bit of insurance, maybe you play that Harris subline as well. But we can move right along to this next fight. We got Erin Blanchfield and Sarah Alpar. And, this is a 125-pound fight. Erin Blanchfield doesn't really have a ton of experience. Sarah Alpar on the other side, made famous by Jake Paul. Unfortunately, Jake Paul has found a way to insert himself in every MMA story that there is. But, if you want to give her some optimism, she's probably has the best training camp going that she can possibly afford now. Got a little bit of a donation there. So I do think that this is a fight that, big odds for somebody that doesn't really have a ton of fights, but, the stylistic advantages may be there to justify it. How do you feel about this, Jonah?
Yeah, I kind of feel similarly. Erin Blanchfield is someone who I'm decently high on coming into the UFC. She's only 22 years old and she has fought, she's 6-1. You mentioned not a ton of experience. Her one loss is a close fight to Tracy Cortez, which she almost finished in the third round by arm triangle. And we know at this point, like Tracy Cortez against the low to mid level at 125 pounds is like -300 in a lot of these spots. Like Tracy Cortez is respected by the market at this point. And Erin Blanchfield was 19, 20 years old when she fought her. I do think she's pretty talented. She's beaten Victoria Leonardo, Kay Hansen. Those are two fighters on the UFC roster. So I think she's decent. One thing I'll mention is you mentioned that Impa sometimes plays off his back. Erin Blanchfield tends to do the same thing. That's part of the reason she lost to Tracy Cortez, is trying to put up arm bars off of her back, which is not something I love, especially at a -300 price. But to me, Sarah Alpar is a pretty easy stepping stone into the UFC for Blanchfield. I just don't see it being much of a challenge kind of in any realm. Blanchfield is not the fastest striker, but she throws in combinations. She'll follow her hands with usually a high kick. We saw that against Leonardo. She dropped her twice with pretty much the same combination. I tweeted it out today. For those of you who haven't seen that fight, really like just 1-2, which wasn't even like particularly great, and then just follows it with a left high kick, and it's like Leonardo doesn't see it coming, and she gets hit with it twice. So I think that Blanchfield is a solid prospect. Do I think she's going to vault her way into the top 15 at age 22? Probably not, but 125 is not a super deep division. And Sarah Alpar got beat up by Jessica Rose Clark. Is Jessica Rose Clark better than Erin Blanchfield right now? Probably, but not to the extent where it's like, oh, I'm going to take +250 on the veteran. I think Erin Blanchfield comes in here and should handle business fairly easily. I think she gets her first UFC win this weekend. It's nice that the fight is at 125 pounds because she was supposed to fight Norma Dumont like up a weight class, and Dumont missed weight, and that seemed like
that one was probably going to be ugly.
Yeah, a disaster waiting to happen. So she avoided that. She now gets kind of the opposite of that situation where she's fighting someone her own size who is experienced, but someone who I don't really think has technical advantages here. So we won't spend too much more time on this fight, but I do think Blanchfield kind of covers her price.
Absolutely. And we got Uncle Weezy saying Alpar relies entirely on her wrestling and Blanchfield is too good for her on the ground. Horrible matchup for Alpar. She's too one-dimensional. And, I got to shout out the one thing that I could say with absolute certainty is that Erin Blanchfield is representing Renzo Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And, I train with a Renzo Gracie affiliate myself. I know and respect what they're doing in New York City. They are some savages in the blue basement. And so, like you pointed out, man, that's where she's had success. And Sarah Alpar, if she's trying to wrestle here, she's going to be putting herself in danger constantly, even if she's able to secure top minutes. And, that's the thing that kind of put me off. I was initially interested in playing her here at that big plus number because of the lack of experience. But as I started to dig in just a little bit more, I was like, man, taking a wrestler when their primary path to victory is control minutes against a better submission grappler, dangerous, and pretty dicey. So I'm just going to sit back on this one, probably have no action. Although I will say, Blanchfield by submission, I was seeing plus 450 on best fight odds. And, I have to say that's interesting to me against a wrestler. Now, granted, the other thing I wanted to point out is I do think Alpar, does have a little bit of punching power in her hands. Granted, it's women's MMA. I don't think she's going to TKO her, but I think the person more likely to land a single punch and change the direction of the fight is Alpar. And especially against a young fighter, how is she going to respond if she gets hit in the face really hard over and over? I think it's an interesting question, especially in the bright lights. But, Erin Blanchfield, big favorite here for a reason, probably got the plus set of skills and stylistically seems like a setup fight for her. So we can move right along the card to another setup fight of sorts. Although, I'm ending up on the opposite side of the big favorite here, and maybe I'll look like a fool after. I faded Montel Jackson in the past and looked like a fool. So, we're going to have to wait and see. But we got Montel Jackson, we got JP Buys, and, I think that this is interesting, man. JP Buys, I want to check this because I can't remember off the top of my head, but I feel like he was favored against Bruno Silva. Let me double check.
Yeah, well, he was a
minus 135 on Tapology, but that was after the market flooded action in the other way because I think he opened a more significant favorite in that spot, and now we're seeing him with a plus 450 next to him, and that just seems like a massive overcorrection. And I would assume that a lot of people in the market got burnt by him in that spot, and that could be why they're feeling that. But it's an interesting matchup to me. How do you feel about this one, Joan? I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, I've seen a few people, and it sounds like you might be on the side kind of with the JP Buys and maybe the market is overreacting. I kind of take the opposite side. I won't pretend it's some hot take to come in here back in, a minus 600 favorite in Montel Jackson. But I was one of those people who bet on Bruno Silva. I got plus 210 for like a unit and a half against JP Buys in that debut. So, I was part of the money that came in that made him go down to just a minus 130 favorite. So you're right, Liam, that like the market had high expectations for this guy. And at least the openers did, right? And then a lot of money came in on the other side in his debut. But with JP Buys, I kind of just think that this guy was kind of overhyped coming into the UFC. And like when I went back and watched his tape, he had situations where he's a front runner for sure, to the extent where if he's not winning round one, he's drawing virtually dead to win the fight. I mean, he needs to get off to a hot start. He slows down late in fights. He does not like getting put in bad spots. I've seen him, cry out for fouls on his opponents when he's put on his back late in fights. Like he's certainly a guy who, if there's a little bit of, if he gets into a little bit of trouble, he's not necessarily the guy you want backing. I don't necessarily think he's the most resilient guy when he gets put in bad spots. And I just don't think this is a great matchup for him. Like, against Bruno Silva, that was down at 125 pounds. And he wasn't really able to bully, Silva at that spot. He's now coming up to 135. Montel Jackson is a massive 135er. Everyone makes jokes about, oh, look at the size of this guy's hands. But, outside of the jokes, like the reach advantage, he's 5 inches taller, 8 inches of reach here. And I think Buys, the reason that people, I won't speak for you, Liam, but for the most part, what I would see if I was backing JP Buys is the Montel Jackson fight. I bet on Brett Johns against him. Takedowns come against this guy, right? Like he's big, he's a decent offensive wrestler, but sometimes he doesn't get that base low enough. He doesn't grab underhooks. You can take down Montel Jackson, but I think it's gonna be real tough for JP Buys to close the distance. And I think the striking is really not that competitive. So I won't spend too much time here, but I think minus 500, maybe it's minus 600 now, is fairly warranted. And honestly, if he hadn't knocked out Jesse Strader in a minute, his last fight out, like we might have gotten a bettable price at like minus 300, minus 400 for Montel Jackson. I just think he's a tier above here, but I'm willing to hear a counter argument. Liam, are you on the other side here? Are you back in JP Buys?
Yeah, man, but I'm backing him small, and I'll tell you why, man. It's in part because of where the line has gone, right? So I kind of expected this line to shorten just a little bit because, there's, for me, a class difference between Jesse Strader and JP Bays as well. I do think that JP Bays is the better fighter, and I think he's got more upside. And, I bet on Strader as I think a plus 550 small, less than a unit. But, it's again just because Montel Jackson, there's something that really concerns me about these tall, long guys who cut a lot of weight to make it down to the weight class. I don't know that Montel his cardio is going to hold up perfectly in this fight. I think the weight cut's going to get harder and harder as he gets older. Because he's a big guy, man. Like, just I've seen it a few times now. And in addition, right, Brett John's fight. Obviously, Brett John's higher level of fighter, proven more, but Brett John's able to get a lot of control minutes, a lot of time where he's getting these takedowns. And I think that JP Bays, if he's not getting shot takedowns, I don't know what's going to stop him from popping out on the back in this spot either. He's kind of opportunistic in that way. I think that, he's got some upside, man. I do think that he has his own paths to finish this fight. I do think that he could grease a close decision here if he's able to get some takedowns and control time. Man, I just think that Montel Jackson, his resume in the UFC is, the win over Brian Kelleher, which is the most impressive win, in my opinion, that he has in the UFC by far, right? And it's his only submission to date. And then he's got a win over Andre Sukumtath, who's not very good, Felipe Colares, who's like, all right. Again, like not a high level UFC contender, not going to be cracking the top 15 or anything like that. And, JP Bays was at least brought in with some level of expectation. So maybe he was having problems cutting down to flyweight, underperforms, looks like crap. And in addition, right, can we all put ourselves in his shoes from a personal standpoint? It's like, what is his wife or his girlfriend fighting 2 fights later? It's like, it's all just an absolute calamity at scene. That's probably an undue amount of pressure on top of you before you're about to go do this contest, thinking about, I got to prepare for this other one right after, and for me, this is a better opportunity for him. Not to say that, he's going to win this fight. I kind of expected Bruno Silva to win that fight as well. I think I had a ticket on Bruno Silva inside the distance in that spot. And, now I'm just looking and saying, are we sure that we're all out? We were all in. Now we're all out from an odds maker's perspective on JP Bays. And, I think Montel Jackson's going to end up in a ton of parlays. And that's why this line has continued to drive up. Minus 500, I see what you're saying, but he's now shooting up to minus 650 across a lot of the market. And that to me seems a little wide. I have a little bit of action. It's 0.4 units in total at plus 375 for 0.2 units and, plus 450, I think it was, or plus 440 maybe. So I'm going to roll with my man JP Bays and hope that he's able to get his wrestling going. The other thing was I didn't see any wrestling attempts really from JP Bays. He wasn't able to get it going against Bruno Silva. I think if he's able to put his game on display, maybe the market starts putting some respect back on his name because he can wrestle. And, he's not the world-class wrestler, but you don't have to be. Brett Johns got absolutely destroyed, I think, by Danny Sabatello, if I'm not mistaken, who's like a real good American wrestler. Like, Brett Johns isn't this world-class, lights-out wrestler. He's just another guy who knows how to shoot takedowns and get control minutes. And, I don't think Montel Jackson has necessarily distanced himself from that. I think he's making improvements, but let's see how it plays out, man. I think the market's higher on him than I am. Personally. Shout out my man Narco Cop says, what's up, boys, in the chat. Appreciate you stopping by. My man Will says, the legend. You're the absolute legend, my friend. Appreciate you stopping by. We got 16 viewers rolling live with us. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. If you haven't already, go ahead and smash that like button, hammer fist it, drop an elbow, whatever feels most comfortable for you. Put it in a choke if you have to, but make sure you like and subscribe as we get rolling here. And we're just kicking it along, man. We got another good fight up next. This one is going to be in the 155-pound division, and we've got a short notice for placement here. Nicholas Moda, he was supposed to take on Jim Miller, everybody's favorite aging veteran, 1 round of cardio, but by golly, he's going to try and submit you or knock you out with a crazy punch in that 5 minutes, and he has found a way to do it against more than one prospect, but he is out. in comes Cameron Van Camp. And, man, I think Cameron Van Camp is a little bit slept on in this spot, to be honest. From what I heard, he was supposed to be the replacement for Luigi Venturini if Paddy Pimblett's visa was not able to come through. And so now we've got him in a position where he's probably been training. He's probably ready for a fight, at least to some extent, at least for the last 2 weeks, been gearing up, getting ready, and knowing that the UFC wants to consider him for an opportunity. So now he's getting one. And Nicholas Mota, obviously a talented fighter, but he was just at evens with Jim Miller. Now he's a massive favorite here. And, I obviously expected him to be a favorite here. He is the guy who was preparing for a fight. He trains with a good team out of Factory X. Young man, got a lot of good things going for him. But I got to say, I think that Van Camp is being a little slept on here. I think if he's able to keep this, if he's able to get takedowns in this spot, he might be able to find a finish of his own. I really feel that the guy's got some talent and some upside. And, has he looked awkward and bad in some of his fights? Yeah. But we're not talking about a guy who's a minus 200 favorite. We're talking about a guy who's, approaching plus 270, I think, as an underdog. I'm going to just double check these odds market wide. And actually, there it is. We've got plus 260 best market price on Cameron Van Camp, and we've got minus 280, the best market price on Nicholas Mota. So big favorite here, 3-1. And that just seems like a lot of respect for him. How do you feel about this one, gentlemen?
Yeah, so honestly, I haven't spent a ton of time looking into this fight with NFL, college football all starting up. I tried to get way ahead on tape for this card this week. And so this was a late replacement. Obviously, I haven't watched a ton of tape. A couple of things I will say is I had watched Mata, obviously, because he was supposed to fight Jim Miller, as you mentioned, Liam. I'm not sold on this guy in the minus 300 range. Like, he won on Contender Series, a striking battle. He looks to be a decent striker, got out volumed. He's not a guy who's going to go out there and overwhelm you with volume for sure over the course of 15 minutes. Does seem to hit decently hard, I will say that. He's the smaller guy in this spot. I haven't watched a ton of Van Camp, I'll be honest in that regard. The one thing I have seen is I did see Thomas Gifford choke him out with a guillotine, and we all know how Thomas Gifford's UFC run went. I will give him some credit as to most of Thomas Gifford's wins did come via that guillotine kind of over the course of his career. It's ruled a no contest, but if you go back and watch the fight, he definitely did get submitted in the first round. But it's just kind of interesting. Like, that doesn't make me feel super excited to play him, but he's the bigger guy here. He certainly is experienced. Mota, like, he's not going to overwhelm you with volume. We haven't really seen his grappling. I saw someone earlier today said that there was like Mota sub at 30-1 or something like that. I haven't personally searched the market for it, but I don't know. The guy's no submission wins, but if you're Brazilian, you better be able to submit someone who got submitted by Thomas Gifford. I know that's a little MMA mathy, but seems like a big number. I think Mota's likely to strike here. I understand him being a favorite, but I can't really give a good number on like what I would, price him at regarding the betting market, just because I haven't really seen Van Camp enough to like accurately price it. But I don't hate your shot, Liam. Like, plus 300. The guy got submitted by Thomas Gifford, but he's bigger and he's fighting someone who isn't super accomplished in Mota on the other side.
Well, granted, man, I actually touched this at plus 230 because I expected, market action to come in and bring it down to that plus 200 figure, and the market went the other way. So it's probably going to be a spot that I add to. I'm going to double check and see what action I put down. I believe it was 0.82 units that I wagered on him. 0.87 units at plus 230. And yeah, man, I might end up adding, making that a full unit, going a little bit over, just because, I think it's a little bit too much respect. I do think that Van Camp, if he's the guy on top, I think that he could submit Mota. So I see what your shout is on that, wide prop line. But I actually think that he's going to have a grappling advantage here. And that's what I'm hoping he's going to exploit, coming off of, I think, 3 wins in a row by submission. But the other thing I like is that, obviously you mentioned he got submitted by Gifford, but otherwise, he's only been finished 2 other times in pro MMA, and that was a title fight, at the time. And obviously Thomas Gifford got messed up, but it was by Mike Davis, and honestly just got hung out to dry by his corner, by the referee that night. Like, just nobody was looking out for Thomas Gifford. And so, yeah, he probably ruined his chin. and just got absolutely flatlined for no reason in a fight where he had no chance to win. So it just seemed like, his career was mismanaged. I don't think Thomas Gifford's like the world's worst fighter. Just didn't have great striking. He's actually like a decent enough grappler when he can get it going. You're not going to out wrestle Mike Davis when he looks like a freaking brick shithouse and you look like a string bean. So it just was, it was a bad matchup and he got messed up as a result. But I don't think that Thomas Gifford's like the world's worst fighter, although he did also lose a fight to Bobby Volker. That wasn't a great look. So I'm not saying that this guy's, world class, but plus 260, it might be something I take a deeper poke on, but, probably nothing more than 1.2 units in total. That would be where I cap my wager on this fight, unless he touches that plus 300 number, in which case we might go Sizzler again. We'll have to see what's up. We can move right along, though, because that's a fight I know you didn't get a full chance to break down. This is a fight I didn't get any chance to break down because they just announced it. Brandon Jenkins is going to be stepping in on short notice. Zhu Rong was supposed to fight Bush. I know a lot of people's bets got canceled there. That's something I didn't even have action on, so I can't complain. Obviously, I was leaning towards Bush in that fight. I had liked what I saw from him more than what I had liked from Rong so far, but he's also young, very young guy, and that to me is like something I don't necessarily love lining up against. Those guys improve very quickly. So this is a fight that I'm probably not going to touch, but maybe something will jump out to me on tape. Do you have anything on this one, Jonah?
Yeah, so I had a bet on Bush. I just don't think Zhu Rong's very impressive. Like, he just doesn't really do anything. And, when he goes to grapple, like, he was fine, but he got out kickboxed by Kazula Vargas, which was like, I don't know, just a poor look in general. Like, Azula Vargas isn't someone who should be outstriking you. On the Brendan Jenkins side, I haven't had a full chance to tape him. I know he hit a flying knee against Jacob Kilburn in PFL a few weeks ago because I was on a plane flying to Vegas and I was trying to sweat out Bobby Moffitt, who I think was like the next fight on my phone. And I obviously had no service, but I was like refreshing Twitter, seeing if anyone had said anything. My friends were texting me like, Moffitt's on top. Moffitt's got an inverted triangle. So all I know about the guy is he hit a flying knee. In terms of the opponent here for Zhu Rong, I don't know what led up to it. Was it a fluke? Did he look good beforehand? So definitely a spot I need to look further on. But look, I see Zhu Rong got up to minus 300 in the betting market, and you better believe that if Brendan Jenkins isn't a complete bum, I'm probably taking a 1-unit shot at him, plus 270. I just don't think Zhu Rong is someone who's covering minus 300 against UFC level fighters. But then again, it's 4 days notice, and this guy might not be a UFC level fighter. So I guess we'll see come Saturday.
For sure, my man. And yeah, that's something I'm definitely going to look into. I'll just say with full disclosure, I massively faded Jacob Kilburn when he was in the UFC. And I've never thought that highly of him. But I do think, it's at least a UFC-esque win for him,
Yeah.
But what else does he have? I'll take a look at his resume here for a second because I barely even heard about this matchup. It seems like he's beating guys with half decent records, at least guys that have had some fights. Got knocked out by a flying knee himself. Okay. Not bad, man. I'll take a look at his record, but seems like a decent enough fighter. Kind of a mixed record, mixed bag. How old is he? 29. Yeah, 29 years old, man. So I don't know. That seems like something I might even get involved in as well if he's going to be a massive underdog. Right now, the best market price, Best Fight Odds is actually showing the old fight still on their website. So
I see the new fight. I see
really?
Zhu Rong like minus 330 with the comeback plus 270, but it's not widely available yet. Books are still kind of getting it up as we go.
Understood. Yep, I'm seeing that right now. Bet online. Okay, cool. Well, then we can move right along to the next one, and that would be, another fight that I've got some action here. This is Pannie Kianzad and Raquel Pennington. A bet I put down, a while ago, probably 2 weeks back. I touched that plus 115 number on Pannie Kianzad, 0.47 units. So, small exposure here to win a half unit. Didn't want to go crazy on this fight, but I do think that there's a slight edge on that line on Pannie. I think that this could easily just be a dead pick'em fight. I think that, Pannie could be slightly favored here given, I think she's had 3 fights in the UFC since we last saw Raquel Pennington. Now, granted, Raquel Pennington's obviously fought the higher level of competition, but we've been seeing the right steps out of Pannie, in my opinion, gradually moving up. I bet Alexis Davis against her in her last fight, and she kind of proved me wrong, I thought, in that spot. And so now I'm more willing to back her in a fight like this, where Raquel Pennington, never is going to blow you away with volume. Not the most active and entertaining fighter, likes to push people into the fence, very good at doing so. Obviously a strong woman. I believe she changed training camps for this fight, which is the only other thing that's concerning me. We might see a little bit of a better look from her here. We might see her a little bit rejuvenated. I believe her partner is Tisha Torres, looked rejuvenated her last time out, looked very good. Physically, I'm not going to say more than that, but I think, there may be some supplementation involved. It's always possible and always something we got to keep in the back of our head. So I think that, this is a interesting enough fight, man. And the line's been close and it's been getting action both ways. I'm seeing a lot of people I respect on the Pennington side as well, which is why I'm glad I've kept my exposure low. But I'm also seeing that Pannie Kianzad, best market price, plus 110. So if that line holds, I'm going to have slight CLV. And, on the return here, we've got minus 125, best available market price on Raquel Pennington. So let's see how it plays out, my man. Jonah, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I kind of thought I would bet on Rocky coming into this spot. I thought that Pennington might take a little bit of my money, but for the most part, I think this is kind of a pass. I think if you got in kind of on Pennington open, like minus 108 on FanDuel, I think if you got in on that, you did a solid job. I think, Liam, you said you got like plus 130 on Kianzad. Like, I don't.
Plus 115.
Plus 115. I don't hate that. You're going to get a little bit of CLV there, it looks like. In terms of how they match up, I want to give props to you for, kind of coming off of your priors a little bit in the past, right? Like, you faded Kianzad her last time out against Davis, probably thinking that, she would get out grappled and, put on her back, and she didn't in that spot. And now you make the adjustment against Pennington. So that's kind of something I struggle with in MMA, is just kind of like letting go of your priors and just being like, hey, look, I was wrong. Kianzad can defend takedown. So solid job to you on that. In terms of this matchup, with Raquel Pennington, I think like peak Pennington, I would probably have a bet here, but the visuals just haven't been great, right? Like Marion Renault, semi-close fight, and Renault, we now know, is no longer with the UFC. The end of her UFC run certainly did not go well towards the end of that. The Holly Holm
fight.
Cash
me a nice ticket on the way out. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you to Marion Renault. I hope she enjoys her retirement. The Holly Holm fight, Holly Holm is the elite of this division, has actually looked really good recently, but that was not Pennington's best performance. She's someone who needs to be pushing her opponent into the cage. Like, she looks to wrestle, but she's not a great wrestler, but actually does a good job. Like, she goes to it, right? We can't blame her. We can't say, oh, she's someone who doesn't, try to get takedowns. We're not calling her Gustavo Lopez out here. Like, she's going to try. She's just not that great at it. And Kianzad is a good kickboxer. So I think the price is kind of right in the fact that, like, I think Pennington is going to be able to put the fight where she wants it to be against the cage. But I do think that there's, Kianzad could have value, because I think Kianzad can win by a large margin, because I think the striking is going to be somewhat of a blowout. Like, I don't think it's very competitive. And whereas Pennington, when she wins, the fight is almost always close with Rocky Pennington. Like, I don't think she's going to smash Pannie Kianzad. It's most likely going to be she holds her against the cage for 4 minutes, and then Kianzad gets off on strikes, and who do you score the round for? And it's a split decision sort of thing. So Pennington's small favorite makes sense to me, but definitely not a spot that I'm looking to get involved, at least on the favorite in this spot. So yeah, pass for me, but I don't hate getting in on a Pennington early or Kianzad a little bit ago, as you did, Liam.
Absolutely. And yeah, I feel like, it's sort of, again, it's one of those fights that hinges on what number you play it at. A lot of times, I feel like if you're newer in the space, you're looking at who's going to win the fight. And, that's what I'm trying to think about too, but I'm also trying to think about what should the odds be. And I just feel like, based on the unknowns here, which is like, what is Raquel Pennington going to look like however long out of the octagon when Pannie Kianzad has been very active? For me, that just says this is about an even fight. And, there's no reason to expect Pannie to lose this fight based on what we've seen from her of late. On the other side, Raquel Pennington hasn't given us that tremendous push, that reason to say, hey, you know what, she really should be favored in the spot. Just, I haven't seen that either, a little bit of despondency in the cage. And that's never a good sign from a fighter, obviously could be looking towards other things, been fighting for a while. So I just think that that's always something to consider, is how into it does somebody look? And, I don't feel like she's all that into it of late. And maybe that changes here. Like I said, maybe she's rejuvenated, changing location. That could be a big part of it. But, barring evidence on tape that she's rejuvenated, I'm going to take the small stab here on Penny and hope for the best. And we can move right along here to a fight with guys that I have looked to fade throughout their UFC runs, man. We got Tafon and Chukwi on the one side, and we got slow Mike Rodriguez on the other side. And, I got to give myself the old pat on the back. I've cashed a couple tickets against Mike Rodriguez, even the ones I didn't deserve with Ed Herman. And so, he's kind of just had a very strange run in the UFC, in my opinion. And obviously has some skills. He's come into a lot of fights as a favorite, but he just hasn't been able to put it together with much consistency yet in the UFC. And so he comes into this fight with Tafon as an underdog. And I did find that a little bit surprising. Haven't played it yet, but I thought that was at least an interesting spot. And, this is going to be a fight that takes place at 205 pounds. I believe Tafon's last fight was down at 185, and he did not perform very well. So he's coming back up here. And obviously Mike Rodriguez, the older guy, he's about 33 years old. We got a 27-year-old roughly on the other side. So Mike Rodriguez just has a physical advantage. He's a much bigger guy, 5.5-inch reach advantage, got the height advantage as well. I feel like, if this fight takes place at striking distance, it's probably going to be a fight that Mike Rodriguez shines as a plus 110 underdog. But how do you feel about this, show?
Yeah, Mike Rodriguez is not someone who I'm really ever looking to back. He's a decent striker, but the holes in his game are just so massive to the point that, like, he loses to guys he just really shouldn't be losing to. And, you just admitted when you were wrong on the last fight. Something I was wrong about is, I thought Danilo Marquez for a second was like the worst fighter on the UFC roster because I thought he just had a single leg and was super gassy. And, that last take was kind of indicated a little bit where, he kind of dominated in his last fight. And then he lost in the third round because he really gassed out down the stretch. But to some extent, I almost laid the chalk with Mike Rodriguez in that spot. Thankfully, I didn't. So I was wrong, but I didn't have to pay a price for it. Just my general brand exposure saying I was maybe going to bet Mike Rodriguez that weekend. But in terms of this matchup, I can't really bet Mike Rodriguez at better or at a worse price than even. I know there's some plus 110s out there. I've seen a lot of people who opinions I respect be on Mike Rodriguez in this spot. It's just not necessarily a spot for me that I feel super confident in getting involved with. And then with like Tafon, this might be a guy who, people were high on him. There's a lot of debate after the Pickett fight. Some people were like, oh, that was a great debut. Some people thought he didn't look as good as expected. And then, the Jun Young Park fight, he got dominated down the stretch. This might be a spot where the market is too low now, right? Like we've seen Park go out there and do that to a lot of guys. Park is a legitimate, probably top 20 talent in this division. He has durability. He has cardio. He has some wrestling. He's kind of the Marc-Andre Barrios prototype I talked about, although he outgrappled Marc-Andre Barrios significantly when they fought each other. So I think it's interesting. I guess I'll pick Tafon here, but he is undersized. If this fight was, I don't want to even say if it was at 185 because Mike Rodriguez can't make 185, but I do think that Tafon is probably better suited for a lower weight class, despite the fact that he kind of looked, slow and not as explosive as he did in his first fight. So yeah, I guess I'll pick Tafon, but it's certainly not a fight that I'm looking to get involved in at current market.
I hear you for sure, man. We got Daz in the chat says laid $5 on Moda sub. Best of luck to you, Daz. Wishing you the very best, my friend. The only other thing I'd mention, man, is that Mike Rodriguez is a southpaw, which is a statistically significant advantage in the UFC as well. Tafon, I don't think is the most refined and sophisticated striker. Obviously, he's got power. He's built like a house. He's got good durability. But, that's my real concern for Tafon is that, in this fight, he could just be getting picked apart by a better striker. And, we haven't seen a ton of takedown volume, a ton of, takedown activity from him. I was very confident, that Jun Young Park, if he didn't get knocked out in that spot, was going to be able to get the win. I bet on him in that spot. I believe it was either as a short favorite or a short underdog, but, was happy to get that price. And, I do think that Tafon is valued by the market because he looks good. He looks like he should be a good fighter. And he's obviously not bad. Team Lloyd Irvin, that's a decent enough training environment. But I do think that Mike Rodriguez, probably should have got the win against Ed Herman. It was like a weird referee's intervention in that spot that cost him. Danilo Marquez, man, I was a lot higher on Danilo than the market. Granted, I got off at the right time because I bet Kennedy against him. I knew Kennedy wasn't going to tire out, and he's a big guy. Very hard to wrestle and control somebody that size like Kennedy is. But, dude, Danilo, in his first fight against Khadis Ibragimov grabbed the cage about 500 times, and he still was able to get him. So I was like, yeah, no, this guy's wrestling's kind of the goods. And I went back and watched his regional fights. He hadn't fought for a while. He had a big layoff. And so he looked like he just was like not training, but I think he was working on his grappling, man. And that's like all he does. He's a nothing striker, but he's a sophisticated enough grappler and can take the back. And man, you don't have to be the world's greatest grappler. You just have to think about it a lot, and you could beat heavyweights because a lot of them are just so bad relative to like other divisions where there's like a certain standard. You're not going to see white belts in a lot of UFC fights from a jiu-jitsu perspective. In a lot of these fights at any level other than heavyweight. Where Derek Lewis is like, I'm the best blue belt in Texas, like. And you're in the UFC, number 2 contender in the world. Okay, God bless. Like it's crazy, man. And that's why I thought Danilo, at light heavyweight had a chance. Even like Lucas Bresky, man, terrible fighter, right? All things considered, but was able to pick up the win last night at Contender Series with ease because he has a submission game, he has wrestling, and if somebody doesn't have the goods to stop it, it just could be a runaway train. Even if they're not a good fighter, by the way. But we can move right along because that is a fight between 2 not very good fighters, in my view. Tafon, who's got very little experience, and Mike Rodriguez, who's got very little to show for his UFC run. But, we move to a fight where I do have action. And, again, I put down this bet really early thinking that the market was going to move significantly because of the hype factor. I thought I was going to give myself an arbitrage opportunity. But, the market has held pretty steady here. Where the best available market price is -200 on Joaquin Buckley. And on the other side, you've got best market comeback on Antonio Arroyo is sitting at +176 on FanDuel. So that's the options that you have out there. Tim asked, who do I want to fade more, Mike or Tafon? That's a tough question, Tim, and you're going to have to give it some long, hard consideration. If I end up with a play on that fight, you could find it on Twitter at LiamPicksFights. But right now, I've got nothing for you. I will, probably consider that a dog or pass situation for myself personally. But in this Joaquin Buckley fight, I laid the wood, man. I put down 2 units at -200 because I've never been impressed by Arroyo, man. Granted, has he lost a pretty high-level grappler so far in the UFC? Yes. But Duran wins severely undersized, and he gasses completely in that fight. Just looked like shit. And I had a ticket on him there. I was very disappointed in the output. I was very disappointed in the cardio. I thought he would make improvements, and I didn't see that. Then I look at, what does he do well? He could strike okay. He could throw some decent kicks. But I think that Buckley is the faster striker. I think that he's probably going to be able to find punches here. I don't think Arroyo has the greatest striking defense. And I think that if he tries to engage in a firefight here, there's probably more firepower on the Buckley side. But, I thought about cashing this bet out as well when the market didn't move, just because I am concerned about the fact that he ate that clean head kick against Kiriko. I was pretty confident he was going to mop up Kiriko in that spot. And I was surprised, but I do think that Buckley is making improvements. I do think that he's a decent enough fighter. I do think that he should have the edge in the stand-up. I think Arroyo, a sneaky angle might be if he's able to get this fight to the ground. I haven't seen a ton of work from Buckley. This is a fight I'm going to go back and revisit on tape. And if I do end up cashing out that bet, I'll let you guys know. But it's already tracked. It's in the tracker. We're ready to rock and roll with it. And, I do think he should be a clear favorite in this spot based on, the work he's been able to produce in the octagon. Andre Muniz, obviously he's shown himself to be something of a prospect as well. And, I was pretty confident in Muniz in that spot against Arroyo. And Arroyo just hasn't given me a lot to love in the UFC. So that's why I faded him here. I don't think he's long for the UFC. I think if it's not this fight, he'll probably be out after his next fight. So, this is probably a loser leaves town fight, honestly. Obviously Buckley probably gets himself more rope with that crazy highlight knockout that he has. But overall, man, I think that this might end up being a greasy fight. I don't think that market's letting plus 180 hang on Ahoyo, given some of his physical advantages. But, he does have the height here. He does not have the reach. I think the reach is on the side of Buckley. So how do you feel about this one, John?
Yeah, so you mentioned, guys leaving the UFC. I think I'll quickly answer Tim's question in the chat saying, who do you want to fade between Mike Rodriguez and Tafon? I think you just want to fade the winner in their next fight. That would be my answer. There's no reason to bet on the fight this weekend. Sit back. We got 15 fights to watch, unless you need action on each one, in which case, Tim, you're on your own on that one. But I would fade the winner. As far as this fight goes between Buckley and Ahoyo, I agree with you, Liam. Like Ahoyo, I should say, is someone who I haven't been impressed with, right? Like, what does he really do well? He might be a decent grappler. He has a decent body kick, or I should say he has like an above average body kick. He goes to it a lot, but the cardio seems to be super detrimental. I mean, this guy is like breathing heavy and not even super high paced fights come the second round. So he's a guy who I don't really love in that regard. With Buckley on the other side, I don't think Buckley's bad necessarily, but he has the great knockout win against Impa, and he actually looked good in that fight against Impa, right? Like he didn't just kind of pull that out of nowhere.
Yeah, he was winning that fight.
He was winning for sure. He looked good. So I don't want to make it sound like, oh, he just has one spin against Impa, because he looked good in that fight. And at that time, I still think Impa is a decent fighter. But at that time, people were really high on Impa, talking about, top 15 aspirations at this point in his career, which I think those talks have kind of, slowed down a little bit. But that was certainly an impressive performance. Goes out there, takes care of Jordan Wright. Jordan Wright has 2 first round finishes in the UFC, but I think we all know that Joaquin Buckley should take care of Jordan Wright, and to his credit, he did. The DiCirico fight just kind of got caught with the head kick, and honestly, I think that Buckley's the better fighter here. I don't want to lay minus 200 on a guy who probably doesn't have a grappling advantage, and maybe that's a hole in my game. Liam and I were talking a little bit before we got on air here about how I really kind of side with wrestlers and people who win minutes consistently, and I think that Buckley likely wins the minutes standing here. Just if someone's not going to wrestle, it's kind of hard to look minus 200 in a pure striking fight, especially when we know that both guys have power to kind of finish the fight at any time, and both guys have shown the ability to get finished kind of at any time. Like Buckley literally just got head kicked. I'm not sure I personally would be laying minus 200 in a striking fight where they're probably going to throw down early and often. So do I think Buckley's the better fighter? Yes, but I'm comfortable passing at minus 200.
I feel that for sure, man. And yeah, when we've seen Ahoyo lose, it's really been by submission the vast majority of the time.
Yeah.
But, I just haven't liked what I saw from him by and large. He hasn't given me a ton to love, and it may be a bet that I come to regret. But I do think that Buckley is the side here. I think he should be favored in this spot. And, I think that barring a head kick, he should be, looking good in this fight, in my opinion. I just like his hardware better for the matchup too. Like I mentioned with those long, lanky guys, I think if he hits Ahoyo to the body, he could really do a lot of damage. Ahoyo's got that big, long, weird-looking midsection, kind of like Dominic Reyes. And, I feel like that's something that, people often like target whatever they're scared about in the fight game. It's a weird little quirk, but it's just like a psychological thing. And I feel like he likes to throw those body kicks to be like, stay away from my body. You hear me? And I do think that that's at least an interesting look. I'd like to see Buckley mix up his attack, go to the body, and keep it at distance. I think at distance he's pretty good striker by and large. But, the only other fight that gives me pause is that Kevin Holland fight where he had a little bit of distance management problems. And Kevin was kind of talking mess to him as well. I think he kind of got in his head, and, Daniel Cormier talks about it, fight the ego, not the fighter sometimes. And I really think that was an ego trap, which has happened to Buckley before. So again, I think you're smart to point out, it's probably a little wild in this minus 200 range, but I do think he's the better fighter in the side here. So we'll have to see how it plays out. Moving to the next fight, man, I think this is the one where we're going to disagree, and that's just fine by me, man. This is a fun fight. I think we got talented guys on both sides, and obviously you've got the guy with more experience here. You got Tony Gravely versus Nate Maness. I'm on the Nate side. You're on the Tony side. I'll give you the floor first, my brother. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, so I bet Tony Gravely. I appreciate getting the floor first. Yeah, I'm excited to go back and forth here. I bet Tony Gravely for a unit at minus 160. I will say that I actually think the way I kind of divide my units is kind of based on the percent edge I think I have, right? So the bigger edge mathematically that I, perceive myself to have, the more units I'll bet. I will say I had a pretty sizable edge as where I capped Gravely as opposed to the market, but I did keep it 1 unit because, the guy's a little sketchy. I'll be the first to admit that, and I'm sure you'll go into that considering you're on the other side here. But Gravely's just a guy who I think his skill set he should be a better fighter considering the skill set he has, right? Like, he is a super strong wrestler. His striking's improving a little bit. He looks a little bit better at distance, definitely carries some power, knocked down Anthony Burkhart twice in his last fight, knocked him out, finished him. That's a fight he was expected to win. He did so. His hands look good doing so. But we've also seen him, against the Freitas get really like pieced up on the feet against someone who a lot of us don't consider to be like an elite level striker by any means. But the reasons why I did bet on Tony Gravely is because I think this guy's a pretty elite wrestling skill set, and he goes to it early and often. He averages over 6 takedowns per 15 minutes, which means over 2 per round, which means 2 things. First of all, it means he doesn't have great top control, because if you have to take someone down twice in every single round, it means you're probably not, finishing rounds on top necessarily or keeping guys down for extended periods of time. But it also means that he has a high wrestling motor. He'll go to that early and he'll go to it often. And that's something that I love when I'm backing someone. I love that he's going to his best skill set consistently. That's what I love about Tony Gravely. So I bet him at minus 160. In terms of Nate Maness, he won against Luke Sanders. We talked about how the Buckley KO was a highlight and it wasn't really something he pulled out of nowhere. The Nate Maness KO against Luke Sanders, I think he pulled it out of nowhere where he was losing the fight. And, part of that falls on him just being opportunistic. Luke Sanders is a guy who historically falls apart in fights. So, I'm not blaming Maness. No, I'm not knocking the guy, but certainly didn't look great in that fight early on, I thought. And then with Johnny Munoz, I don't know. That's an impressive win at this point. There was point deductions there. I think Munoz took the fight on 2 days' notice. But after we saw Munoz get that sub over Jamie Simmons, the stock of Maness rose a little bit, I think, despite the fact that he wasn't fighting because, he got controlled for almost 10 minutes of that fight, but he did stuff 14 takedowns. So he certainly showed the ability to do so. The one last thing I'll say before kicking this over to you, Liam, is I'm not sure how you feel about individual sports books and shouting them out here. I know you mentioned Bet Online earlier, but DraftKings
anyone you want, brother. Of course.
Yeah, DraftKings has a new market called a decision only. So the fight only pays out if it goes to the scorecard. So if either fighter finishes, the bet is void. It only goes through. You only get paid out win or lose if it hits the scorecards. I saw Gravely at minus 190 in that market. I think he should be a bigger favorite than that. I may add a half unit at that price because I think that a lot of Maness's, win equity comes via inside the distance, likely late in the fight. I think he's going to have trouble winning minutes early against Gravely. And the reason I say it comes late is, and I don't want to steal the thunder here because you'll talk about this, Liam, but we saw the Brett Johns fight. You mentioned Brett Johns isn't a great wrestler, but he was kind of able to just outlast Tony Gravely in the grappling, right? He submitted him in the 3rd round. You get on the wrestling mats, and Liam, you know way more about this than me, but Tony Gravely, American wrestling, he would out wrestle Brett Johns in a straight up wrestling match, but it's MMA. And he got tired and gave his back and got choked out down the stretch. And I think that, for Maness to win, it likely looks something similar to that. So I like Gravely here, but I acknowledge the guy is certainly sketchy. So I think his skill set is really strong. I just need him to put it all together. But I do like him at minus 160. And I may add that decision-only prop on DraftKings in the minus 190 range. That's all I got, Liam. You're on the other side here. Tell me why I'm losing at least 1.6 units. I might lose more depending on what you say here if you talk me out of the other bet.
Oh, goodness. Well, here's what I'd say, man. I think that Tony Gravely minus 150, I totally get it, right? And if you're playing it at minus 160, that makes sense to me too. Honestly, I played it above that. So I played Nate Maness plus 162, and I played him at plus 170 so far, and that is for a total of 1 unit. So I have 0.2 units down at plus 170. I have 0.8 units down at plus 162 because I expected this line to shrink a little bit. Like you said, I think that Nate Maness, his work in the octagon has aged well, right? Obviously, the Luke Sanders fight, he's not winning minutes in that fight, but have you watched a Luke Sanders fight? Who wins minutes against Luke Sanders?
Right.
Very infrequently does he lose minutes. He just loses fights all the time. And it's something that, kind of a self-sabotage type deal, but I had Nate Maness as an underdog in that spot, plus 123, and, was able to cash that, right? So it didn't look all that promising throughout, but Nate, like you mentioned, man, opportunistic. That's the word that comes to mind. He's got a really legit guillotine. we've seen something that could trouble, Tony is that, like you said, man, he likes to go to the wrestling, but he has, I think, his average hold down time. So like how long he can actually secure control for a takedown attempt is like 30 seconds. So just over 30 seconds of control for every takedown he gets. Why is that a problem? It's a problem because you mentioned it, man. It's exhausting to wrestle. They do it for 7 minutes for a reason. It's really, really tiring. And the only thing that I really hate about Tony Gravely's game is that he wrestles too much for too little. If you're going to wrestle, you need to take somebody down and hold them down. You need to be able to take a deep breath, in my opinion. You need to be able to go, oh, okay, we're cool. Let me drop a couple hammers. It doesn't work when you're afraid of getting submitted. And it also does because pressure creates fatigue. If you're in the guard going, oh shit, he's grabbed my arm, oh, he's doing this, you're going to start getting fatigued. And you see a lot of times guys are in control positions where they should be relaxed and they have to get up. They push away. They're like, oh, F this. I'm freaking out down here. My heart rate's going through the roof. I got to get out of here. So I do think that, Tony's not going to feel safe, I don't think, shooting takedowns consistently. I do think he can shoot himself into a guillotine if he does. And, if I had to criticize his striking, which again, we're criticizing a guy who's a big favorite. So it's like, obviously, Tony's very talented. Obviously, Tony's very skilled. I said I think I could see him as a minus 150 favorite in this fight, despite the fact that I like Nate because of his experience. But I'm just trying to critique him as this big favorite. He throws a lot of big looping shots on the feet. He can put together a good combination. He can put together a good double jab, step back and throw an overhand and catch people coming in. Like he can throw some interesting striking combinations, but he can also get one note as the fight goes on. He could also just start hanging that jab out there a little bit. He could get a little lazier with the takedown attempts. He could fire them off from further away. And I do think that that's where he starts putting himself in danger. If we look back the last time Tony Gravely loses, like you said, he gets submitted in that third round. Prior to that, First Combat Sports I ever attended live, First Combat Sports event was King of the Cage, man, when Tony Gravely got submitted by Patchy Mix. And, that was a guillotine choke rapidly, because he gets after those takedowns, but he hangs his neck, man. And, he kind of does that rocket ship takedown where he goes and blasts straight forward through somebody. And it's impressive, man. It's just like a physical display. He looks like a linebacker at 135 pounds taking somebody down. But I also think that that's the concern for him, man, is he could rocket himself into a dangerous guard from Nate Maness. And I do think that Nate's straight punches on the feet could cause him problems. I think he'd be landing first if they get into protracted striking exchanges. But I do think that the power edges with Gravely, I do think that Gravely's got some interesting, wins on his record. Obviously beat Chris Mutino on the regional scene, was able to grit out that fight against Geraldo de Freitas. But that Anthony Burchak fight doesn't tell me a ton. And so, if you're going to give me this big plus money figure on somebody I think is pretty talented in Nate Maness, I'm going to take the shot. I already am planned with house money because I bet him as an underdog last time. So we got one unit. And I wish you the best of luck. I do think that Tony Gravely was the side probably or close to the side at the price. But I think maybe that minus 160 is the hinge point here. And that's what I'm hoping, brother, because I played this for one unit so far. And, I would consider adding if it gets, above that plus 185 range, because I do just cap it differently than the market is capping it so far. So let's see how it plays out. That should be a fun one. And it should be pretty high level. I think Nate's only loss is to Taylor Lapilus and, 16-3, Taylor Lapilus, not a bad fighter in his own right. So if Nate loses, it would be a big deal. I think that this is a pretty credible fight, one of the best fights on the card, in my view. And we move along to a fight that is not competitive according to the odds makers. We've got Armand Sarukin. I believe he's the biggest favorite on the card. Him and Montel Jackson have been straddling the same kind of line, but he's been pushed out to minus 800 on some books. I'm looking right now, minus 850 on Bet Online. Plus 600 is the return on Christos Giagos. And if I'm honest, man, I cashed Christos Giagos last time out, by submission as well. I thought that Soriano was kind of a gimme fight for him. But, man, Giagos, when he's able to get his game going, when he's able to be the grappler, he's good. But when he's getting grappled, he's not so good. And I think that Armand is just such a dreadful matchup for him. I think that the odds reflect that. Full disclosure, I have an 8-unit parlay with Armand Sarukin, Valentina Shevchenko, and Mo Miller, who fought last night at the Contender Series. And Mo Miller was able to come through for us, so that parlay advances. Got 2 more events that we need to get these massive favorites across the line, but that total parlay is paying at minus 170. So I like those odds given the quality of fighters that I'm backing here. And, Armand is probably the most dangerous of those fights, because I thought Brandon Lewis last night was a pretty credible challenge for Mo Miller, but I was so confident that Mo Miller was going to be wrestling the whole time. And, Giagos has some submission skill. That's why I say, I would be a little scared touching it at the minus 800 type number. I think that that's a bit out of hand. That being said, I played this all the way up to minus 650. I thought that was a fair price. I thought that I still might be getting value there. And I thought as a parlay piece at minus 650, I think it's fair, really. So if you have access to BetMGM and you feel like you need a parlay piece, Armand Sarukin is my favorite parlay piece of the weekend. And it's just because, Christos Giagos, you look at the losses, it's when he's getting out grappled by, Charles Oliveira. It's when he's getting out grappled in some of his other fights as well. I forget who it was that took him down just over and over relentlessly, but pretty embarrassing loss. He even got out wrestled at portions to Jakar Close, who's not a tremendous wrestler. He's not bad, but I just don't. It was Chris Wade. That's who it was. It took him down pretty relentlessly in that fight. So, I rate Chris Wade as like not quite as good a wrestler as Armand Sarukin. Obviously, he's very talented. Long Island legend, Chris Wade for wrestling. But I do think that Armand Sarukin, he took down Islam Makhachev. He took down Davi Ramos. I think that in a fight like this, he's probably going to be getting 4, 5, 6 takedowns. He's probably going to be lifting, returning big time, and Giagos might look for a way out at some point because I do think it's going to be relentless pressure. But Armand's not the biggest finisher. I don't think he's attempted a submission yet in the UFC. So I'd be interested to see if he finishes this fight. I kind of think that it could go either way. But, Giagos, I do think he's probably going to slow down over the course of this fight in the high-level scrambles. And I like Armand big here. Let's talk about it, Jonah. How do you feel about this massive favorite?
Yeah, I don't know if I have too much to add. I think Armand's pretty elite. With Christos Giagos, you mentioned like he's good when he's the better wrestler. But when you rely on your grappling so much, like Giagos isn't really striking. When you rely on your grappling and then you kind of run into like the brick wall that is Armand in this spot, it's really hard to see paths to victory for Giagos, right? Because he needs to do something better than his opponent. And there's something that he does better than most of his opponents. He's at like a massive disadvantage here. He's just so happening to run into probably a top 3 grappler at 155. I don't have it in front of me. I would probably rate Charles Oliveira, up there. We got respect. The champ for sure. Makhachev is probably at the top, maybe top 2 as well. But there aren't that many guys, is my point, above Armand Sarukin at 155, which is a division that has some of the best grapplers in the UFC. I think of 155, 170, obviously with Colby and Kamaru at the top. But he's running into kind of a brick wall here. And it's something that I'll talk about a little bit in the co-main event as well. And I don't have a bet in the co-main, but with Devin Clark, like Devin Clark usually gets his game going by wrestling, but I think he might run into a better wrestler than him, at least early on in the fight. But we're talking about this fight for now. I think Sarukin rolls here. Minus 650 still available on MGM, as you mentioned. I likely won't get involved with this side. Something that I might play or look to play is Sarukin to win in rounds 2 or 3. Oftentimes FanDuel has those out. PointsBet has those out. And I'm just curious what the price is. I'm not sure I'm going to play it, but if we get a big number on a guy who has not won via finish at the UFC level just yet against someone who slows down, right? Giagos slows down when he's dominating fights, even against like poor fighters like the Carlton Minus fight, where he was a big favorite, was dominating early. He didn't really come close to losing, but the third round, as I put it on my show oftentimes, it's, you were clenching your butt, right? Like it was not a situation where you felt like super confident in Giagos. And I think, Armand's going to wear on him throughout the fight. And I can see a late second, third round finish where it's not even that Sarukin gets super aggressive. It's just that he's kind of has a guy underneath him who doesn't want to be there anymore. And so yeah, I think Armand wins this fight, and I think he has a chance to finish in the second or third round. It'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out, because I think it might get to a point where it's like, does this guy want to finish? And if he wants to finish, he can finish, and if he doesn't want to finish, he won't. And that's just kind of he kind of do whatever he wants at that point late in this fight. So yeah, I got Armand. I think he wins. I think it's probably domination.
Yeah, man. And I'm looking, and, like I said, Armand's never attempted a submission in the UFC, but Yago's has been submitted a bunch of times. And, that's kind of like when you're looking for a way out, how you can get one without losing face. And I do think that plus 420, which I'm seeing on FanDuel, that might be worth a poke. I might be interested in playing that myself. So just something to consider. I do think that, we're going to see him wear him down over the course of this fight. So those round 2 and round 3 props may be a good shout. Our man Tim is pointing those out as well. So decent plus money figures there. I don't know if I'm going to take a poke at those, maybe that round 3 prop, but we will have to wait and see. We should look next for just a second, because I really have very little on this. If you have anything, by all means. I have not looked into Mandy Baum. Ariana Lipski has done me wrong in the past as well. I think that she's shown some upside. I thought that was a really vicious knee bar that she was able to pull off against Dredd. But I also don't think that she's shown very much else in terms of her upside in the UFC. And, I think that this is somebody that kind of had higher hopes coming out of KSW. So maybe she's able to turn something around here. But, the loss to Shevchenko hasn't aged all that well. Just not a ton of positives that I could point out to her. But, I think that this is a closely lined fight. Let me take a look at those odds. We currently have, minus 110 on the Ariana Lipski side from BetMGM. That's the best market price. Plus 106 is the best price for the comeback on Mandy Baum. So, this is a fight where it looks like the sharper books are starting to take some action on the side of Lipski, but I can't really speak to this matchup with certainty. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, so I took a look at it. I'll be quick here. I've kind of had, a love-hate relationship with Ariana Lipski, and the fact that the love came from fading her. I cashed a ticket on Molly McCann a few years ago as a big underdog, and then I got absolutely buried on that knee bar against Carolina in daily fantasy. It was a situation where Lipski was chalk, and she came through. I wasn't actually watching the fight. I've told this story before, but I was at like a family event eating dinner, and I just see like a notification, like, what a knee bar by Lipski, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, this girl who I've always said can't really grapple goes out there and just buries all my lineups by coming through for the rest of the field while I faded her. And then the love came back. I had a big bet on Montana De La Rosa against her earlier this year. The bottom line with Lipski is I think she's a really poor grappler. Her striking's okay, but we haven't really seen it too much at the UFC level. I did watch a bit of Mandy Baum's last fight, which was in Bellator. I watched the first 30 seconds. She gets taken down and then locks up a body triangle from the bottom. So I saw that and I was like, you don't know what? I'm not betting this girl in her UFC debut for sure. I don't know if I've got the guts, the cojones to bet on Ariana Lipski, but I do think this is probably a winnable fight for her. You mentioned like she came over from KSW. They call her the queen of violence. Like, she has some decent stand-up skills. There should be a fight where she's able to showcase them. So you're certainly buying low on Ariana Lipski. If you're betting her this weekend, I'll give you props. You're definitely, this is probably the floor of where her market will be in the UFC. Because if she loses, I'm not sure she'll get another shot. But yeah, I really didn't see anything from Bohm, because I went into the fight trying to find an angle to fade Lipski, but I just don't think there's one. And if I had to bet a side, and honestly would be the queen of violence, but I'm not sure I'm going to get there myself. But yeah, we can move on.
I was going to say, man, if anything, I'll consider like a half unit play at that minus 110 figure, because I don't think that will last. I think UFC experience versus no UFC experience, she's probably going to close minus 130, minus 125, something like that. So I might get involved there, try and snatch a little bit of closing line value, because I'm seeing that the smarter books are taking action the other way. But we'll have to wait and see on that. I always encourage you guys, check out Best Fight Odds. Make sure you're getting the best price available to you. I think that's, half the battle, to borrow a phrase, when it comes to winning these bets long-term and profiting. So we're going to look next to a fight that you already mentioned, Jonah, so I'll give you the floor first, man. 205 pounds, Iwan Kutilaba and Devin Clark. You know, I went to the well twice on Ankalaev, got the first knockout. Not enough, says, freaking the wild
Kevin
man.
McDonald.
Yeah. Wild man, Iwan Kutilaba. I think that Kutilaba, you know, very dangerous first-round fighter, man. When he blasted out Khalil Roundtree, I was actually really impressed by that performance because that's what I'd want to see from him every time, man. Take somebody down, keep him pressed against the cage, don't let him freaking move, and, make like Jeremy Stevens. When I knock people out, they don't freaking move. How about you, Jonah? What do you think about this, man?
Yeah, I had mentioned the fight earlier just because I think it's interesting stylistically. You know, first things first, I got a bone to pick with the Athletic Commission in Vegas with the Kutilaba versus Jacoby fight. I'd live bet the draw there after the first round, and I thought it was a draw. It obviously did not get scored one, but the reason it was a draw is because Kutilaba comes out on fire, and he won that round. I thought it was a clear 10-8. And that round, you mentioned the Roundtree fight. He didn't have success against Ankalaev early in fights, but that's because he's fighting, Ankalaev, who, for my money, is probably, I don't know. I guess we've had some new 205ers on the block, but I certainly think he's top 5 at the very least. So that's a tough matchup for Kutilaba. And we know what this guy is at this point. He's only 27, but I think we have a really good baseline for what to expect. He's a guy who's going to come out. His hands, he hits hard, but his best skill set is wrestling, right? And he's going to come out early and try to do so. And then he's going to tire as the fight goes on. And the Devin Clark situation is kind of, I think Devin Clark, he reminds me a little bit of Tony Gravely, where I think his skill set should translate to a better fighter than what we've seen inside the UFC, right? He's a decent wrestler. His hands are coming together a bit, but it just seems like anytime he gets a big opportunity, like the Anthony Smith main event, landed one strike in that fight. Alonzo Menafield was a good spot. I bet on him live in that spot. But even against Ryan Spann, I just don't think that, I know Ryan Spann's main eventing, we'll get to him next. I think that Clark should have a better skill set than Spann, but just from what I've seen with the guy, he just seems to mentally get himself out of fights. He's a decent wrestler, but doesn't always go to it. His striking isn't great. I think he could out cardio Kutilaba, which is the way you beat this guy, right? You just kind of survive early and then it's somewhat easy to take over late. So, plus 130, I see his best current market for Clark. Somewhat tempting, but also somewhat fragile guy coming off of his first main event, losing, now facing an absolute, the guy's nickname is the Hulk, and he's going to face a barrage in the first round against Kutilaba. So, look, I kind of wanted to bet Devin Clark, but I just don't think I'm going to get there. It's one of those things where I think a live entry on Clark is probably better than pre-fight, because he's probably, if he can't get his wrestling going, which I don't expect him to, he's probably going to get his butt whooped for the majority of the first round, would be my read.
I definitely hear you there. And yeah, man, a lot of people struggle with Iwan Kutilaba in that first round. Obviously, Ankalaev, just a much more dangerous fighter, much more patient, much more technical. And so he was able to pick somebody like, Kutilaba apart. Kutilaba is able to thrive when he puts somebody under unbearable pressure. Dustin Jacoby, say whatever you will about his skill set, say what you will about his ground game not being up to snuff. Dustin Jacoby is a savage, just won't quit on himself. Very, very hard to finish, extremely durable guy. And does he get hurt? Does he get cracked in that Grishin fight where Grishin shows up 10 pounds overweight? I'm kidding, but just shows up massively overweight, obviously not fit for the weight class. I do think that Dustin Jacoby is just a better fighter than he gets credit for. And so Iwan Kutilaba impressed me in that fight, and that he was able to hang around when he was so tired and not get finished, because he's been through a lot of damage. That's a real concerning thing for me about Iwan Kutilaba. Both of these guys, young guys, but, it's actually Iwan who's significantly younger. Devin Clark's 31, just starting to, age his way out of prime in all likelihood. And, it's the heavier weight classes, so people can extend their primes a little longer. But, man, I think that Devin Clark, what's so noticeable to me is that he's uncomfortable on the feet. There's no jab. There's no 1-2. There's big looping, winging shots, sprinting forward in complete panic mode. And for me, that just seems like a recipe for disaster. Iwan Kutilaba, for all his other flaws, he hits like a effing truck. Devin Clark hasn't shown the best durability. Like you said, he hasn't always shown the best fight. I want to give him the credit. I think he had lost a loved one like literally 2 days before that Anthony Smith fight. I don't think that was the fight he was preparing for. So had a lot working against him there, but, kind of just got like comically dismantled by Anthony Smith from a technical jiu-jitsu perspective. Just doesn't look to have a very solid ground game, in my opinion. Obviously, pretty decent wrestling, but nothing that blows you away. Again, it's like one of those guys that can get takedowns, but doesn't really secure a tremendous amount of top control time unless the opponent's completely gassed. And, again, could that happen here? Yes. Do I think that it happens, 45% of the time? That's where I'm like, I don't know. I think it's actually like probably a fight where Cutelaba gets him out of there early, a decent portion of the time. And so it's probably a fight I'm ultimately going to pass on. This is something I might look to target, the prop markets. That's normally a good way to look at Cutelaba fights, is to look for him in that first round because he's a dangerous first round fighter. And, what's really scary to me, dude, is just that Devin Clark, kind of puts himself in dangerous positions from a grappling perspective too. Like Ryan Spann shouldn't be submitting you at the UFC level in all likelihood. And that's 2 times now that somebody that probably, should be a more competitive fight for somebody who's like an emerging contender. And he just gets blown away by not having a requisite ground game. So want to shout out my man, Uncle Wheezy, says, so right about that, Liam. Over 60% of Clark's fights have taken place in control time positions. That's on purpose because he is clearly uncomfortable striking at distance. No doubt about it, man. Runs in from far away. Cutelaba, if he's able to time one of those uppercuts, that could be a danger as well. But we'll have to see how it plays out. I think Cutelaba by knockout, Clark by decision are probably the most binary outcomes of that fight. But, I don't necessarily rule out a late finish for Devin Clark. He's not much of a finisher, but Cutelaba just gasses so bad. Obviously looked durable enough in his last fight, but how many times can you just take a beating when you're completely exhausted? Like he's bound to get finished in one of these spots if he continues to gas out as badly as he has. He looks phenomenal physically. That's the only other point. It's just that Iwan looks absolutely shredded for this camp. He normally looks pretty good, but dude, he just looks absolutely unbelievable. I was really impressed by the physique on him and probably on all the supplements, which I appreciate in somebody I'm going to back from a monetary standpoint. But dude, that brings us right along to this main event. Before we break it down for the people, just want to say, go ahead, like this video if you haven't already. Let a friend know about the show if you haven't already. Get subscribed. Really appreciate when you do. Always trying to bring as much good content as I can to the people. And on top of that, try and bring on really smart guests like Jonah to assist me in breaking down these cards. So hopefully we can get you some winners this week. But you know that this week, next week, every week, I'm here breaking down these fights because I love it. And I'm glad that you guys are here breaking it down with me. 16 people rocking with us live. Appreciate you guys sticking around to the main event. So here we go, man. We got Anthony Smith. We got Ryan Spann. Light heavyweight matchup. A lot of interplay between the guys on this card. Devin Clark has fought these guys. And, in both of those fights, he gets wrapped up pretty quick, right? But, the things that jump off the paper at me for this matchup, man, was just the fight doesn't go to decision, hanging at minus 260. That was a play for me, man. I dropped 3.1 units at the minus 260 figure. And the reason being is because, just looking on paper, Anthony Smith has gone to decision in 10% of his 51 professional fights. Doesn't happen. Just like very rarely happens. And, on the Ryan Spann side, I think it was 7 out of 29 of his professional fights have made it to the 3rd round. And he's been in scheduled 5-round fights as well. So it's not like he doesn't have a chance to go there. That's across professional and amateur fights. So the guy just doesn't make it to those rounds. Like we've seen that he gasses in the UFC. We've seen Anthony Smith, for all his other faults, comeback finisher. Like if he is still around and you haven't gotten him out of there, he can finish you late. He could be finished. He looks like he's a fighter on the decline, That being said, got 2 favorable stylistic matchups back to his old ways. He's in terms of fighters on this card, nobody has more first-round finishes than Anthony Smith. So I think that the chances that this fight ends early are very high. I don't have the strongest take on who's going to win this fight, to be honest. Like I think that, Ryan Spann has way more knockout power in his hands. I think he's going to be, a naturally big light heavyweight, whereas a lot of these guys Anthony Smith has been fighting. Devin Clark is a middleweight. Devin Clark is a middleweight with a big ass and big thighs. Like he's not a tall guy. He's not, he's kind of just like a muscled up guy. He's not really long, doesn't have assets. And I do think that, Ryan Spann's got assets, man. He's got a really long 1-2 that can hurt people badly. Sometimes fight IQ is what costs him. He's hittable. That's the other problem for me with Ryan Spann. I think that the more technical striker is Anthony Smith. I think that the more powerful striker is going to be, Ryan Spann here by a significant degree. And we've seen Anthony Smith get dropped at distance. I think he's got a 1.2% knockdown rate against him in the UFC. I think it's the Thiago Santos fight comes to mind. There's a few other times where he's just been bamboozled, and most of those were at 85. But, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. We've seen him systematically dismantled by the likes of Glover Teixeira, cashing me a big ticket there. Thank you. Praise be to the God Glover, who I also have as a plus 225 dog against Blachowicz. Let's hope for the best there. But I think that this is an interesting fight, man. I'm pretty fired up for it. And I'm really just hoping that we see violence and get a finish. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, so I think I don't have a bet on the fight. I think that the angle that I most liked was fight to end inside the distance. So I agree with you there. I mouthed it out earlier, just kind of taking into consideration only their UFC fights. I included Ryan Spann's Contender Series fight on that because he fought Emiliano Sordi, who those of us who follow MMA now know that that's a legit UFC level opponent that he fought. And I mouthed it out. They did go inside the distance 72.5% of the time, I think, which is just about what a minus 260 is. But then you can just kind of think stylistically, Ryan Spann's been to the championship rounds one time in his career. We've seen him slow down in the UFC before. And Anthony Smith is a guy who kind of capitalizes on the fact that if someone slows down, he's able to not only take advantage and come back, but finish them, like you mentioned, right? Like he's a guy who comes in and finishes late in fights. It's not like Devin Clark.
Ozdemir, Alexander Gustafsson comes to mind.
Right, several times over the course of his career. And with Devin Clark against Cutelaba, he might come back and then they 28-28 draw again. You know what I mean? Anthony Smith isn't going to get 10-8'd and then just come back and win 2 rounds. If you let him back in the fight, he's going to come back and finish you. And, just even thinking more about stylistically, Spann, I just don't think he does anything super well. You know what I mean? He got outvolumed by Sam Alvey, which is a major red flag to me. He almost got knocked out by Sam Alvey.
He made me think Sam Alvey was good, bro. I swear to God. I swear to God, dude. I have lost so many bets on Sam Alvey because Ryan Spann made me think he was good. It's pissing me off, dude.
You want to know what I think it is? I think it's that Ryan Spann just isn't that good himself, and it was just not great fighters. He walked in the same combination over and over. So just kind of in terms of that, that was a fight that saw the scorecards that probably doesn't a majority of the time. I think you could say the same for a lot of Anthony Smith's fights. I know the Glover Teixeira fight ended up finishing, but it could have been stopped a lot earlier, right? That was a total beating, and that's the kind of cumulative damage that sticks with the guy, especially when you're fighting people bigger than you. Anthony Smith might have gotten finished more at 85, but now towards the end of his career, fighting bigger fighters might not bode well for him. So I think the under's decent. I'm not sure I'm going to lay the minus 260. I think minus 270 might be the best available price now. Liam, you moved the entire market. Look at you go. It's been 3 hours since you played it. So no, that's a sick little line move so far. But yeah, in terms of who wins, I'll pick Anthony Smith. I considered laying minus 160. One thing I want to shout out is Monk on Twitter, I believe is his name. He posted something regarding control time in the octagon, and Anthony Smith within grappling sequences is in control 10% of the time. I do think that Spann is bigger than him. And although Smith plays off his back well in jiu-jitsu scenarios, I don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibilities that he spends a fair amount of time on his back in this fight should Spann go to takedowns. Ultimately, I don't think that Spann's going to lay and pray for 25 minutes, but I don't want to lay minus 160 on a guy who finds himself on his back a ton. So minus 165 for Anthony Smith. I think I just prefer to get involved live. You mentioned, Spann slows down. He wins round 1 and round 2. This is just kind of your classic, comeback artist against a guy who's a little bit of a front runner. So I prefer to bet Smith live. I will pick him to win the fight. And I think kind of regardless of which way you lean, I do think that inside the distance is kind of the way that this one finishes when it's all said and done in the main event on Saturday night.
Awesome, man. Got to shout out Daz Files. Says Devin round 3 or decision. Hedge bet for me. We got my man BP hopping in. Says, what's up, lads? Smith and Ion are locks all day long. I always like to make the joke. I never use the word lock unless I'm talking about my buddy Manpreet. But I appreciate the sentiments, brother. Hoping for the best for everybody who's already taken action one way or the other. Glad to know that the market has moved with me on that fight not to go to decision. I think it just makes a lot of sense from a stylistic standpoint, from a data standpoint, everything that we've seen from these guys. Both of them are finishers. Both of them get finished. Neither one of them has excellent durability. Neither one of them is immune to getting submitted. It's like, for me, everything about this matchup spells violence. Ryan Spann, it doesn't really show in the stats because he doesn't get knocked down. But, dude, his durability just isn't good, man. And it's been several times. He's been knocked out in the same position more than one time against the cage. He does not have great IQ there. He will hang out on a low double and get hammered by people who are standing above him. And it's happened more than once. I think it happened on the Contender Series. Yeah. I know for sure it happened against Johnny Walker. And, that's just a fight that he really should have been winning. Honestly, he was clowning Johnny Walker for the majority of that fight and still couldn't put it away. What I've noticed about Ryan Spann is that in an effort to land and be offensive, he just gets touched on the chin, man. And I think this fight could go either way as a result. That's why I'm not laying that -160 on Anthony Smith, like you mentioned. I have some concerns for Anthony about his long-term trajectory. But, I do think that we've seen some mental improvements now from Anthony. He went through a tough time spiritually, emotionally, for his family. We don't always often, take into account the real personal anguish of these fighters. If somebody breaks in your effing house, that's way bigger to you than what fight you have coming up. It's honestly got to tax your mental if you can't beat up a home intruder or you're having a hard time. It's like that's going to play with your confidence. So now the UFC has given him a couple gifts, right? They've given him those build back spots. And frankly, who expected him to come through in that Jimmy Crute fight like he did? No one. Nobody, or very few people that I heard talking about that fight.
Not
a lot
me.
of people, not me either, brother. I like Jimmy Crute in that spot because I thought he was the younger, fresher guy who was going to hit harder. A lot of the things people are saying about Ryan Spann. The difference, Ryan Spann is going to match Anthony in those physical dimensions that we have not seen his previous opponents do. Anthony Smith easily out-wrestled Devin Clark, which is a huge problem against Iwan Cutelaba, by the way. Now, granted, Cutelaba doesn't have the natural leverage that Anthony did based on his height, but, dude, he's just like a very powerful wrestler in his own right, and Devin Clark hasn't shown himself to be the best defensive wrestler. He's got decent offensive wrestling. But, in this spot, man, Spann, I couldn't risk, that line on Spann either, given what I know about his grappling concerns, given what I know about his fight IQ concerns, given what I know about his cardio concerns. And so money line perspective, I'm going to stay away from this. I'm probably going to look, if I do decide to play it at one of those, fight doesn't start round 4 or 5. I did touch for about half a unit. Fight doesn't start round 3 at +130, because based on the math that I had done, a lot of their finishes are in those first 2 rounds. A lot of the times they've lost are in the first 2 rounds. I'm just like, you know what? I'm willing to take a small shot there. I don't know if I'm going to end up tracking that play, but that's something that I did touch personally because I was seeing that the under 2.5 was at -125, I think. And then I was seeing conversely, +130 on the fight not to start round 3. I was like, you're saying 2.5 minutes difference represents more than 5%? Maybe. Yeah. But I like the fight not to start round 3 based on that plus number figure, because it switches to -160 for the fight not to start round 4. So, odds makers are basically saying they think somebody's getting finished in the 2nd or 3rd round.
Yep.
And the market is as well. So that's how I feel about that fight. Jonah broke it down for us as well. So we've done it. We went top to bottom. We broke down every fight on the card. Don't have strong betting takes on all of them, but we're able to touch on a lot of these different fights. Some of them we agreed, some of them we disagreed. I hope that you guys got value either way from the arguments that we're making. And, always do your own research, whether you follow the picks, whether you fade the picks. I hope that it helps you take a better informed risk each and every time out. So Thank you all for rocking with us. It is the good guys versus the bookies each and every week on this show. And that is the good guys like me. That's the good guys like Jonah. And that's the good guys like each and every one of you who stops by and supports the show. Everybody who shares it, everybody who gets subscribed, everybody who likes this video. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. Couldn't do it without you. So thank you all very much. I wish you all the best of luck on your bets. Want to let you know the next place that you could see me is on the Plays and Phase YouTube channel on Friday. I'm going to be doing a show with my man at Gordo Gambles, at Gambles Gordo. Check out his work if you haven't already. Do a lot of streams with him. Love rocking out with my man Gordo, and I'm happy to be joining him this weekend. Jonah, before we get out of here, man, I want to kick it to you. Say thank you so much for coming on, man. Appreciated the breakdowns. Really felt like the people got a ton of value from this conversation. And, I know that you're always putting out high quality work. I try to share it as much as possible. So tell the people where they could find you. And thank you again so much for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I had a good time. We were talking before we went on air about how, I didn't have a ton of bets this week. I only had 2, but 15 fight card gets you talking. We're at almost 2 hours now. So thank you for having me on. You guys could find me on Twitter at JShiffyDFS. I tweet about a bunch of things, a bunch of sports, mostly betting content. And I do MMA content for FTN Network. All of it's free. You could find it at ftndaily.com, ftnbets.com. I do a podcast each week with my co-host John Kelly called The Undisputed MMA Show. You can find it on his YouTube channel at John Kelly DFS or wherever you listen to podcasts. So, Liam, thank you for having me on. It was a good time. I appreciated talking fights with you, and we'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely, my brother. Appreciate you. And, on the way out, just let everybody know that I can be found on Twitter and on Instagram at LiamPicksFights. I appreciate when you guys get at me there. Always let me know where you're taking action, whether you're following or fading. I appreciate it. And if you guys have thoughts on this, if you have thoughts on how we can improve the show, go ahead and drop that in the comment section below. Always appreciate when you do. So God bless everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your night. I hope that you all enjoy those fights. And until next time, come back next week. We'll have all the same fun again. This has been Liam Picks Fights.